Hey there, it's Estrellas, and today I want to talk about my own personal ghost stories. So, my last video I talked about the history of ghosts and what they could be and the theories behind them, some science, some not science, and then my own theories personally. And I mentioned one sort of ghost story of my own in that video, but I also wanted to kind of expand on it and talk about my own ghost stories. I don't have that many, but I feel like I have enough that I've experienced myself to believe in ghosts, at least what we call ghosts. I still am not sure if I believe completely if they are beings that have passed on, something like that. Anyways, to the stories. So when I was a kid, like 5 or 6, one of my first interactions with the paranormal was actually when I went to stay with my great-grandmother at her house. Her house, weirdly enough, was connected to a funeral home. I don't know if that's normal for funeral homes. When I was a kid, it just seemed like, oh, okay, so the people that run the funeral home have to live in the house that's attached to it. I'm not sure if that's a normal thing. Looking back on it now. But her house is attached to the funeral home, so it was kind of normal for my brother and I to play in the parlor, and like, you know, our water that we would go drink would be in like the grieving room, and really the only room that I didn't go to in the funeral home to play around in was where they would, you know, store the bodies and get them ready for the funeral. So it was kind of morbid thinking back on it now, but it felt just like normal to me. That was just how it was when I went to my great-grandma's house. So in the house itself, there were a couple extra bedrooms where we would stay, so we would sleep over the night and not have to get a hotel or something when we came to visit. I remember mostly from these like trips where I would just get really sick all the time, especially at night. That's one of my biggest memories. But this particular time, I believe it was Christmas Eve, and I had a stint of when I was younger, from ages like 4 or 5 till I was about, I don't know, 10, 12 kind of, where I would talk in my sleep a lot. And a lot of times I would not just talk in my sleep, but I would sit upright and just start saying things in my sleep. My brother would come across this pretty often when we used to share a room, and then even when we didn't share rooms anymore, if my door would be open, he'd walk by in the middle of the night, go to the bathroom, and he would just see me sitting up in bed talking about dancing with pandas or something. So this was kind of a normal thing to find. But then one night, Christmas Eve, my dad came to check on me, and I was sitting up in bed and I was really freaked out. I was kind of screaming a little bit, like just like pointing at the closet that was directly across from my bed. And my brother, he was asleep in the bed next to me. I guess he just didn't wake up from it because he'd heard me sleep talking so often that he just was used to it. And according to my dad, there was like a dark mass in the closet, and I was telling him there was a person in there, and he of course checked and everything, and there was nothing there. And so my dad actually believes that it's like my great-grandpa like checking in because he never got to meet me. So that was like my first encounter with the paranormal, I guess, in my book, if you want to call it that. Could have been a night terror. It could have just been I was in a new place and was freaked out because there was like a lump in the closet that I didn't know what it was because I hadn't slept there before. Who knows? Pretty much there's really no interactions with ghosts after that until I was about 12. So we moved around from place to place all the time, and so finally we landed in this place in San Antonio, and these houses that we ended up moving into, they were built in the 1930s, so really old for American standards, and we didn't really think too much about it being haunted or anything until things started to happen in the house. So first thing that I noticed when I moved in was my cousin and I, we were there at the same time when she kind of came with us when we were moving our stuff in, because it was over the summer, and so she stayed with me in my loft bed. So the bed was lofted up pretty high, you could touch the ceiling from the bed itself, and we had just made it. It was our first, I think it was our first night there actually, and we were in there talking, chatting, you know how people do, and we were sitting there, kind of just talking. We're like, okay, we should probably go to sleep now. Probably go to sleep. All right. And so we just made the bed. It was all tucked in, and the middle blanket got ripped out from under, like in between the sheets, and pulled to the ground. And we freaked the fuck out. We were screaming, we ran down the hall, my grandparents were there. They basically told us to shut up and would like go back to sleep. It was nothing, blankets fall all the time, which totally valid, but it got pulled from out from under us, or I guess on top of us, and we just made the bed. So it was strange, but you know, we could kind of dismiss it. We were freaked out, of course, but we were in the same bed, so we could sleep the night. So we slept the night. And, you know, everyone kind of dismissed it, even though we were certain that it was a ghost. And then after that, I would stay in that same room, and things would happen. I was homeschooled for part of my life, so my homeschool desk was underneath my bed with a little rolly chair. And at night, I could hear the chair rolling around. And even though we had cats, my door was shut to my room, and my cats were not in my room. And this happened pretty much every night. Every other night I would hear it. I'd gotten used to it at this point. I think someone was just playing with it, not really sure. And along with this, there was like a door opening and closing for my closet. I would like go to bed with it shut and wake up in the middle of the night and it was open, that kind of thing. Never really felt malicious. It just was like, oh, okay, there's something else here, but I have to deal with this because we're not going to move for another 2 years. And so I don't think my parents really believed me until they started having experiences of their own in the house. And so the way the house was set up was that there was a long hallway that was kind of off to the side of the house that had the guest bedroom, my brother's bedroom, my bedroom, and then right next to the living room in the middle of the house was my parents' bedroom. And so it was the living room and then the kitchen and the dining room area. And so at night, my parents started hearing what sounded like a party, but it only happened when we left out wine glasses or champagne flutes or anything like that. We would start to hear what it sounded like a party happening outside, clinking of glasses, light chatting, some like kind of soft music playing in the background. But when they would open the door to look out into what they thought would be people, there was nothing. It was dark, it was quiet, nothing. Shut the door, they'd hear it again. Super strange, super off-putting. Sounds kind of like a prank, to be honest. But it happened often enough and everyone was asleep in the house that it was just a really strange thing to happen. And then on top of all of this, some of the story that I told before was that one where my mom, she was hanging out in her little area when it was like 2, 3 a.m. and then she kept hearing noises and stuff and finally yelled at it and we didn't really hear much from it after that. And so my family's had other experiences as well, going back to even my grandparents and my dad's grandparents. I've told them stories about when people pass on, they, you know, come in contact with other people. As much as I believed in ghosts at this point in my life, I didn't actually experience any more until I got to college. So I went to school in a really fucking old Texas school, and there was ghost stories abound. There was like ghost tours that you could take, like when you were started getting, there were ghost tours you could take in the very like first week of school and everything, and there's just ghosts everywhere, ghost stories, people talked about people in the dorms hearing ghosts and stuff, and I kind of dismissed it because there's so many people living in the dorms. How do you know it's a ghost and not just your neighbors? That is until I started to experience things for myself. Now, I never felt anything freshman year when I lived in the first year dorms, but then my second year I became an RA and I ended up in the most haunted dorm on campus. I still didn't really believe it too much because I didn't really feel anything in there. I feel like a lot of people, they have a feeling when there is a place that's kind of spooky. And there were buildings on campus where I would like walk into and there was just like an eerie feeling about it. It wasn't even the stories that were told, but it was just, it felt a little off. And then one of those buildings ended up being one where multiple people had committed suicide in that area, and they used to be a dorm building, but now it's Now it's just a kind of like offices and just a couple classrooms. Anyways. Once I was an RA and I moved into the most haunted dorm on campus, I had heard the stories where there were, on the first floor of the building, there was a girl in white that would be seen fairly often, especially in the showers. And then, you know, people would run out screaming and then nothing would happen. I mean, people would run out screaming and then no one else would see what they saw, that kind of thing. The most talked about one was marbles. So basically people on the third floor, which is the very top floor of the building, would hear what sounded like marbles rolling down the ceiling when there was no one above them. So that, all of that, like those type of stories, I was kind of like easily could dismiss them until I started experiencing things myself. So I lived on the second floor, and as an RA, the first week of school, the first week you're there as an RA, you live in the buildings pretty much alone, just with the other RAs, because it's your own orientation week and kind of training into becoming an RA, which is a resident assistant. And so on my floor, it was just me and my co-RA that lived in the suite. And I knew where all of the other RAs were at the time, and it was nighttime after training, and I was putting books in each of the residents' rooms, to, like, you know, little goodie bags and stuff too, just to like welcome them to the school. And I was up there alone. Like almost all the doors were open to their rooms. I was just going in and out, making sure everyone had what they needed. So I was putting books in each of the residents' rooms. They were like student handbooks and that kind of thing with goodie bags, and I was trying to get them ready for when the residents would arrive. I was up there completely alone. I knew where all the other RAs were, out getting dinner, that kind of thing. And it was like about 8 or 9 o'clock at night, pitch black, and I see what looks like almost like a dark silhouette of a child-sized person that darted across from the stairwell all the way across to the laundry room, which is kind of like a closet. It's really super small. It was at the very end of the hallway, and I was like a couple doors down from it. And so I was positive of what I saw, and so I was like, oh crap, did someone like leave their kid in here? How would a kid even get in here? Because it was locked up. I don't know how it would even happen. So I went down there to check, and of course there was no one there. And so events just kind of escalated after that. The third floor where the other RAs were was directly like above the rooms that me and my co-RA on the same floor had. So there was a suite of 2 rooms with a bathroom in between, and directly above that were the other 2 RAs. And so we were the only people in the building besides the one RA on the first floor. So that'll be important for later. So one of the things that started to happen was the RA that had a room that was kind of like catty corner from me. They had experiences where stuff in their furniture in their room would be moved around out when they'd be training and that kind of thing, where if they left it, it wouldn't be there when they got back. That sort of weird thing. There was no janitors that were coming in at that time. You know, it was 2 weeks before school would even start, so we were really alone on campus. And you know, one night, you know, they would hear lots of noises at night and that kind of thing, and finally they just said they needed to cut it out. And it seemed like it stopped after that, but I think it just moved into the room next to them, which was the room directly above me. The reason I say that is because a little after they told the ghost to fuck off, I started to hear things. And when I started to hear things, it was when the RA that was above me and even her co-RA were gone for the weekend, and I would hear what sounded like furniture being moved around and shoved, like dragged across the floor, you know how that sounds, and like heavy boot steps, which was really weird because when she was home, it was very light footsteps. I would hear her moving around sometimes, but it was never like furniture shoving around or anything like that. So it would be very strange, and then when she would get home for the weekend, after the weekend, she would notice that her furniture was also moved around. So she didn't really seem to mind it too much, I guess because it really didn't affect her unless she was gone. So it was just me lying in my bed hearing the heavy footsteps and hoping that it wouldn't travel downstairs to where I was. Except that eventually it did. So the last story I have from this place, I mean, there were many, many nights of footsteps and that kind of sort of stuff and noises that I would hear all the time. And my co-RA on the same floor, she did not want to talk about ghosts. She was like, it's not real, don't want to think about it, don't even mention it in my presence. But when I was the last week of school, I was checking out residents, so I would have a lot of them come to my door and sign up for times and then knock on my door, and I would get the paperwork and get them set up so that we could go check out the room and they could leave for the year. And so one of these residents came, knocked on my door, and I opened it completely wide. And now I know there's like, in this particular room that I was in, it happened a lot where my door would slam shut and the bathroom door would open or close, and it was just the pressure differential in the air. And it was a totally normal occurrence, not a big deal, but it only happened when you would close the other door, or maybe if you had a window open, something like that would happen. So it was kind of normal to have that happen, except in this case, I opened the door wide, my bathroom door was shut, my co-RA wasn't home, and I was like, hey, you need your paperwork, you're checking out? And she said, yeah. So I like turned to my desk to grab the paperwork. And as I'm turned, my door slammed shut. And while it seems a little freaky, I was kind of used to it happening, so I was like, oh, okay, I'll just open the door and we can, get to business. Except the door handle wouldn't move. I had my hand on the door handle, and I tried to like open the door, and I was like shaking it because it wouldn't budge from its position. And now there was no way for my resident on the other side to manipulate this at all, because even if she was holding the door handle on the other side, it wouldn't affect my ability to turn the door handle on my side. So I thought that was a little freaky. I was pretty freaked out at this point because I was like, well, it wasn't an air differential, and it's not her. So I walked to my window. I stood there for a couple seconds. I think I counted to like 5 or something, and then I turned back around and I went to the door, and it opened perfectly fine, and it was normal. There was no pressure against it, there was no force, and she was sitting there white as a sheet, just terrified. And so I was joking with her and I said, well, it looks like the ghost just doesn't want you to leave. So that's pretty much the ghost stories I have for my life. I mean, I'm sure there's some I don't remember. I've heard so many stories from my family that at this point it's really hard for me to not believe that whatever a ghost is, if it's a spirit, whatever it is, there's something we don't know, and there's something messing with our reality in some way or another. So, that's pretty much it, and I would love to hear your ghost stories in the comments. I almost didn't make this video because I was thinking, well, there's so many ghost stories out there you can sift through. There's hundreds of them, thousands of them probably. But my friend mentioned that once you get into something, like, you want to have all of the material you can get from it. And so, putting this out there, if you're interested in it, cool. Give it a like. Let me know if you want to do more ghost story stuff, or if you, I'm also going to be doing some videos on like science things, other things I'm interested in, maybe some makeup stuff. I'm not good at it. I just like it a lot. I think it's fun. I think the history of makeup could be a really cool thing to do it on, so let me know your thoughts, and thanks for watching.